what is Tikkun Olam? It's Hebrew. Olam is world, and Tikkun is healing or repairing, the repair work that we all owe the world. It's a concept that's extremely popular and alive in modern Judaism, but it refers to something that I think touches all of us, which is the notion that the world is in need of repair and that all of us are here to repair it. I'm going to back up to a slightly radical question because I think it'll also help us set the ground here, which is I was going to be really incendiary and say, does the world need healing? Is the world, in fact, not a perfect place that is set up to run so that we live, we die, we grieve, we rejoice, trees grow, air is produced, everything is lovely? And I thought, well, let's not be ridiculous. But I would sort of like everybody to talk about how it is that the world needs healing, because I think each person sees a slightly different world. Each of us lives in a slightly different world, the world of our own perception, the world of our own social action. And I wonder if everybody could talk about how the world needs healing.
I would say that from a practical reality, that the world needs repairing in many ways. In our communities, we have people living in great poverty, and not only poverty materially, but poverty in the sense of poverty of spirit, that people need connectedness, they are lonely, they need companionship, they need, again, connectivity. And I guess I would also, if I just step back, I think that all of us have broken places and that the spirit of service is a reciprocal one. So it's not, serving those who are broken and those of us who are serving are whole. It is literally that we also heal ourselves in the process of healing the world.
Well, is the world a beautiful place? Absolutely. I take a look at all of you, I see beauty in you, I see the world outside, and there's beauty, even in the confusion, in the grief, in the most what we would call ugly place, there is beauty. Even in poverty, there is beauty. And I know it's a contradiction, but having grown up in a country where there's poverty, the level of beauty that is in there is the beauty of having enough of nothing. And of having one another, and of not wondering, about the shoes in Target that you never saw, and of never wanting a steak that you never saw. So there is just simple beauty in the simplicity of life. And I really believe that our role in the world is to not only notice that beauty, but to also see the places where we can make it better, because there are a lot of places where we can make it better. And the question is maybe, why are we not? And that question then takes me back to, the places where things are broken. In the old days where community lived together and where each one was just who they were and didn't have to worry about an image or have to perform or be someone that they are not. I believe there were wholeness in that, and that we all really gave from a place of holiness. Now, as we start to move away from the center, from the community, and we get into our individual places and not being connected to community, not being connected to our purpose, and not being connected to the communal myth, then the problem start to arise. Who am I? Who am I alone out here in the world? It is a lifelong question, and I really believe that is the reason why we have come here. We have chosen to come to this world not to be tourists, but to really begin to bring that little water of healing that we have brought here so that we can then begin to share with everyone. So as we heal individually, we must heal collectively. So it's the Dagro phrase, we either all go together or we don't.
It's very complex. I've thought about this healing the world for a long time, struggled with it, been depressed about it, sometimes been optimistic about it, sometimes been totally fatalistic about it, sometimes been apathetic about it, and most recently, with the Alliance for the New Humanity, decided that the least we can do is try. The world situation is not good. I mean, if you really believe Al Gore and the other environmentalists, maybe 10, 15 years from now, places like Bangladesh and coastal Florida could disappear off the map of the world. There are even experts saying that in 50 years, we could risk our extinction as a species. I've talked to really good scientists who say that if insects disappeared from our planet today, then in 5 years, life would cease on this planet. But if human beings disappeared from this planet today, then in 5 years, life would really flourish on our planet. So, I mean, the basic question is, we are not the most important species. Maybe nature is saying the human experiment didn't work. I mean, I'm just looking at the really dark side. So, you know, having struggled with this and also having an Eastern background where you can sometimes accept things and say this is the way it is, but you know, there is such a thing. I come from a school of thought which says that everything is an interdependent co-rising in our consciousness, that the world actually doesn't exist out there, that we are not in the world is in us. And when we have something, a divided mind and a divided consciousness within ourselves that somehow manifests out there. The world is constructed, it's conceived, it's governed in our consciousness. And therefore, if, you know, before I go and fix the world out there, I have to ask myself, you know, am I totally non-violent in my life? You know, with my family, with my community, with my friends, with my relationships? And if I'm not, then you know, I can't love show love if I don't know love myself. If I want to create peace, am I peaceful to begin with? And so I'm struggling with this. I don't know the answer. But I do think the least we can do to fix the world is to create a critical mass of collective intent which, from the tradition I come from, it says 3 things if you can do, you might solve the problems of the world. And these are 3 Sanskrit words. The first one is satsang. Satsang is the gathering together and sharing our stories, which we're doing here. This is satsang. Simran, which is the second word, which says, try to remember who you really are. And then the third component is seva, which is actually going out and doing something out there which is not about me. Okay? So if I can engage in changing the narrative, if I can engage in looking at my true being and reflecting on it, and if I can go and do something out there that is not about me, whether it's about, you know, homeless children or, you know, helping the environment by planting trees or whatever, and if there's a critical mass of people engaging in this activity, then maybe the world will change. And if it doesn't, then we were a speck of dust in a little junkyard of infinity, and so be it.
I am an ancestor of the future. There's going to be 500 years from now, there's going to be 1,000 years from now. When it comes, I'm going to be the handprint on the cave wall. I'm going to be the one scribbling them little things all over the walls. And they're going to look back and say, ooh, those were our ancestors, and what did they do? They said, ooh, they lived their life like to the fullest. And it doesn't matter how they died, it only matters how they lived.
Is repair all about bringing us back to a pre-industrial paradise or to a perfect mythic state?
If it was totally a perfect world, we would be doomed to eternal senility. Okay? So.
Did you just say eternal senility?
Yes.
If it were perfect, wait a minute, I gotta sit with that. If it were a perfect world, we would be doomed to eternal senility.
There would be nothing to do.
Okay.
There would be no creativity. The very impulse for creativity arises from what we call divine discontent. And if it's a totally perfect world, what are we going to do? Okay? So the relative world, the absolute differentiates into the relative world through opposing energies, which are divine, diabolical, sacred, profane, all of that. Therefore, there are three basic forces that take care of evolution. One is the creative impulse, and that creative impulse is truth, goodness, harmony, the direction towards idealism, perfection. And then there's the complete opposite: inertia, ignorance, violence, disruption, chaos, anarchy, disorder. And then the tension between the two is what keeps the world going. If you didn't have that, we wouldn't have a world. And it's really an expansion of awareness. I start seeing my inseparability from the chain of being, even selfish reasons. I see that, I'm kind of totally interdependently dependent on you and everybody else. And so when I start to see that inseparability, when I start to feel it deep inside me, then I think I experience love and compassion as a product of that, and I have the natural impulse to accelerate the forces of truth, harmony, goodness, love, compassion, connectivity, knowing fully well that that real perfect place doesn't exist, but I'd like to go towards it anyway.
Well, there is a Jewish saying, just because it is not given you to complete the task does not mean that it is not yours to begin it. So that's sort of what we're talking about. Go ahead.
Well, and there's a wonderful quote from Dr. King where he uses and it was right before he died, where he talks about cathedral building. And in some sense, when you think about what we're trying to do, we all have some piece of the cathedral. We can't necessarily even envision what it is or what it will be like many generations to come, perhaps. But we each have some piece of it. And when I think about the work that I see people doing to repair the world, it's not towards creating something nostalgic utopia that perhaps never existed or something in the future, but it is about the process. It is about the engagement and the striving and the building, and that in and of itself is an end and a means towards, again, repairing the world. And also, again, I think it's part of what it is to be human. That we all have that sense of wanting to be and being interdependent, and acting that out through serving others is the way that we recognize and realize that impulse.
Well, I think there is a serious contradiction between, if something is broken, do you go back and put it into pieces versus acknowledge that it's broken and try to make something out of it? And the human tendency is, if something is broken, let's fix it, and let's put it back the way it was. Well, first of all, if it got broken in the first place, it wasn't meant to be that way. So you need to not try to go back and start it all over again, because if you put it back the way it was, which is even impossible, and if you manage to put it back somewhat to what it looks like, you are calling for it to be broken again. Yeah? And so it's not...
But it was my favorite cup.
Yeah, so it was your favorite cup, and so it's helping you to grow up to another cup. And so as a result, a lot of time we tend to not move forward because we're grasping to hold on to the past. And we're trying to not even take that step because we're hanging on to things. And this is at the world level, that we're trying to put the earth the way it was before. Well, there are certain things that have disappeared completely. How are you going to bring them back? What you need to think about is, we have lost this, but what can we do to help the others not get there or get to a better place? Yes? And so as we really begin to reflect on this and on the state of the world, it is also going to be important that as we see the calamities and the devastation and the depth of the grief that we don't let ourselves be overwhelmed by it and stop doing things. Because a lot of times we get not only depressed, but we throw our hands up in the air and say, you know, nothing seems to be helping. Now imagine a little bit if everybody put their hands up in the air. What would happen? Well, the next food you're waiting for will not come. The next healing you're looking for will not come. The next doctor who is to tend to you is not going to be there. The next visionary who is to be born will not be born. And so it is our responsibility to really make it a determination every day. I will make a difference. It doesn't matter if I see the whole big picture of it, but my commitment is to make the difference and not to contribute to the problem. Because when we do not contribute, we are a part of the problem. And that is a problem, you see? And so how can we then begin to get out of ourselves and our self-inhibition and our fears and our, well, there's nothing that can be done. If there was nothing that can be done, you know, as Deepak said earlier on, then we wouldn't be here. We are here for a purpose. So quit being an observer. Quit being a tourist. Quit being a guest in this world. This is your home. This is you. So make it better.
Some things will come along as invitations, and some things will come as invitations from within, and whether you respond to it or not is your particular choice.
There's a school of thought right now that, I won't say it's a dominant school of thought, but it is a school of thought amongst both evolutionary biologists and physicists, that we are part of a conscious universe, that nature is conscious, that nature is creative, and that nature constantly takes leaps of creativity. If you look at evolution, there are these leaps of imagination, you know, where primates become humans, or where amphibians become birds. And there's a school of thought that these are actually, that imagination is an event in nature which is a discontinuity. It's not a logical thing, okay? There's a jump from here to here with no transition in between. It's not algorithmic. You can't program it into a computer. Therefore, imagination is an attribute not only of the human brain, but because we are part of nature, it's there in nature itself. There's nothing, all creativity comes from imagination. And as she said, there's no limit to it, that if you can imagine something, then it exists. If not right now, it exists as potential, because imagination is a never-ending horizon. Imagination, therefore, is the first thing. And, you know, if some of you have heard the butterfly story, how many people know the metamorphosis of the butterfly? The rest of you don't? May I tell?
Yes, please.
Okay. So here is what biologists tell you about a caterpillar turning into a butterfly. There are a number of cells in the dying, decaying, overconsumptive body of the caterpillar that scientists actually call these cells, they call them the imaginal cells, okay? Scientists refer to these cells as imaginal cells, and they say they're dreaming. They're imagining the birth of a butterfly. And these imaginal cells start to gather in little clusters. So you have a cluster here, a cluster there, a cluster there. And now they start to use the dying carcass, the decaying body of the caterpillar as their nutritive soup. It becomes the culture medium in which they grow. And one day, the connectivity of the imaginal cells reaches what we call a critical threshold. And on that day, a dormant gene that's been lying asleep in the body of the caterpillar, it wakes up, and in that is the whole information code for a butterfly. And soon the butterfly emerges. Now, this is literally a quantum leap in imagination, because the caterpillar has nothing to do with a butterfly. You know, caterpillar is a worm with a low metabolism. A butterfly is a flying creature. It has a different musculoskeletal system, different heart, different eyes, different antenna, different everything. Okay, there's no resemblance. You know, the evolutionary biologist who told me about this, she said, imagine taking your bicycle to the repair shop and you go pick it up and there's a Gulfstream jet waiting for you. And it's all the same stuff. Okay, it's all the same stuff. So I personally feel that if we could collectively harness our imagination, there's no limit. But imagination is not enough. The second thing is the emotion of love. See, if you combine the emotion of love with the ability to imagine, I think we could definitely take that quantum leap in evolution.
And then we need what, Michelle?
Well, I think we need entry points for people too. I mean, it's sort of grounding that metaphor. That's a beautiful metaphor, for instance, for when you think about social change movements. You think about the civil rights movement, and you have individuals who, over generations, work towards a common goal that they can only imagine. I mean, imagine someone who was a slave, you know, envisioning freedom or living in a democracy, a free society, and over time that gets, you know, connected into something that actually can metamorphose into a reality. But people need to have a sense of their own individual efficacy in terms of getting involved and getting started. So I would just add the imagination and the love, and then the work of my organization, the work of many organizations, and it also, I think, increasingly becomes the power of self-organizing. We have, along with these catastrophic threats that we face, we also have new powers and new tools to mobilize people and to engage people and to imagine possibilities that were beyond the realm of possibility of our ancestors. So I do think that as you ground this conversation, we need to think about how can people take first steps. How can people find their piece of it? How can they uniquely tie their passions, interests, and skills to the needs of the world in a fashion that they feel realized and that they connect with others to start to realize what's only possible, first of all, by starting with this sense of imagination, love, and joining together.
A great place to start, at least the place I started, was with The Power of Myth and the work of Joseph Campbell.
Joseph Campbell wanted his work to be accessible. He didn't want it to be stored away in a dark basement somewhere.
Joe Campbell was a perfect example of following your bliss, and you knew it when you met him.
An entry in his journal when he was 14 years old, and he said, I want to write an outline of everything. I want my outline to be able to include a toothbrush and philosophy.
He was an athlete, jazz musician, man of the world, enjoyed the pleasures of life.
His greatest virtue, I think, was his enthusiasm. He got very enthused by other people's ideas. He would let their enthusiasm infect him, and then he would slowly digest it and fit it into this outline of everything. Nothing was wasted. It was ecology of the mind. Nothing was wasted.
And he spoke. He was a masterful speaker. So yeah, Joe Campbell. You had to love him.
One thing is for sure, biologically, human beings are emotional creatures. Okay? Our cortical brain is about 4 million years old. Our emotional brain, our limbic brain, is 100 million years old. So when it comes to taking action, people never make rational decisions, even the smartest ones, okay? Even the smartest ones. They make an emotional decision, and then they justify it through rational thought. Yeah. So it's very important to know that even though we pretend to be creatures of rationality, we're bristling with emotion. And that action step has to be something that comes from an emotional surge from within you. That's why you're right when you say find that one thing that you're passionate about. Secondly, where they periodically actually physically gather to talk to each other. And thirdly, they pick up one project in their community, whatever that is. You know, I was in New York 3 days ago. I spoke to a group of people, about 30. I said, pick up a project. And they chose to go to a Chinese restaurant every Sunday and feed the first 20 blocks of homeless people. That's what they chose to do. They felt good about it, and it was easy, simple. But imagine for a second global communities picking up little projects like that, whatever they're passionate about, or whatever moves them, and gathering together, and engaging in self-reflection, and sharing stories, and connecting with each other through, today, you know, the internet is the cloning of our collective soul, basically. It's the Akashic record right there in cyberspace. And maybe we can create that critical mass of intention, of passion, of emotion, and of action.
Yeah. But let me also add to what they're both saying, that it's never late. Because some people say, well, now I'm 75, it's late for me. It's never late. So it doesn't matter where you are at in your stage of evolution, there is always a beginning. The beginning is what is going to be important. And so if you say it's too late, then you would have, again, killed that imagination and that passion and that desire to take an action. There is something about when we all connect, just like that butterfly, there is that unconscious thing that springs up without logic, without, you know, any way for you to know that it was going to come. But it takes all of you, you know, coming and putting that seed out there, and then that magical thing sprout out. And so really think about this deeply and don't let it die within this hotel room, because there is so much more awaiting all of us. And when we can say yes every day, even when it's confusing, say, confusing today, but I'm going to take that step. The step to the unknown, because it is really that unknown, that mystery piece that makes everything possible. Are you listening?
So I worry that people are afraid to go really risk something, and therefore they lose a hope that they were going to lose anyway. But they don't find the one that's hidden from them. So, you know, when I was young, I remember we always used to say, well, someone should really do something. And then it turned out that we are them.
And you don't always know you're making a difference. That's one of the big things.
Yes.
You have to go out with the goodwill and do your best. And some dumbass little thing you may do, some total stranger you may smile at, you may have lifted them to be able to do something that they couldn't have done before. So you can't be sitting there counting. You can't count it. You can't know.
Yes.
But if enough people do that, and we believe that consciousness is a field, then enough people doing that would get rid of war.
Yes.
Do you really believe that?
I really believe that. I really believe that.
What do you all think?
Now, come on, I didn't hear that as a yes. Convince me.
Well, and individually as well as collectively, is anybody sitting there with a burning question or comment? Would you like to step up to the mic? Yes, go ahead.
What do you all think it is that's been the biggest disconnecting factors? What's disconnecting us from our powers to make things happen?
I think connectivity. It takes a certain crisis in the world for us to suddenly realize that we do have that power, that we do have that intelligence, that we do have that creativity, that we do have that imagination, that we do have that love and compassion and caring as well. So now is the time. Connect. It's the power of connectivity.
Okay, thanks. Anybody else?
I believe you have that answer to you the way you pose that question. And I do agree with Deepak that, yes, it is about connectivity. And I also think that it's not about making problem isolated. You know, it's my problem and it's your problem. But to see that anytime there is a problem somewhere, that it is a problem of a community, that there is something either in the ecology of a community that is not working, and that's why someone might be going crazy. And that if there seem to be a lot of people and nothing is happening, that the connectivity of a community is not working or feeding the soul of the individual. And I really believe that it is about believing in the power of the self to make a difference. And finally, I believe that it is about our ability to say yes to life and all it takes to make life work.
The artist is the social conscience of a society. Never forget the role of the artist in a society. It used to be said the pen is mightier than the sword. I would replace that, the artist is today's social conscience. When tyrannical regimes come, what do they first do? They go after the artists, you know? When tyrannical regimes come, that's where they go, because the artist speaks with a rebel's voice. The artist has a vision. The artist sparks passion. The artist sparks emotionality. Societies that honor their artists are progressive societies. You know, you go to Ireland, for example, you land in Dublin Airport, and it's a tribute to their art and to their artists. And see what they have produced in the world, you know, from poets to philosophers to writers to songwriters to Hollywood. They have made major contributions because they honor their artists, and they recognize that even economic empowerment comes when society looks at their artists and says, these are our conscience.
Sometimes in life, you're beyond your capacity. You did what you could do. You did what you knew how to do. And at some point, you have to ask for help. There's some things that are beyond you at a certain time in your life, or maybe forever. And isn't that wise?
We haven't talked about it, and I may be alone in this, but I do believe that that we all need to reinvest ourselves in the political process, and to that it is a way of making a difference. I don't know the answer to the money question. I don't believe we can legislate against greed, but I do believe that our political life shapes directly the future of our children and the society in which we live and the world in which we live, and that if we abdicate our responsibilities politically, there's a great loss, and it is a part of the service, and it is a part of repairing the world, and we need to be mindful of it. And I feel like we too often are unfortunately caught up in cynicism and apathy around our political power, and that we need to refocus ourselves in that way.
Yeah. I always say this: if you do not vote, you lose the right to complain. And so when you believe in something, it's important that you make your voice be heard. And those people who are in offices, we have elected them. Whether you have gone out and voted or not, because you did not vote, you have consented with those people who have voted, that you agree with them, with the people they have chosen. And so if you do not agree with something, get up, make something happen. It's like it's the whole idea of peace. We equate peace to going to sleep. In Africa, peace is an active action. Hello? Peace is an active action. Don't go to sleep. Wake up, be alert, breathe peace, speak peace, eat peace at any moment.
So I always tell people, before you go to serve, make sure you are in tune with the universe and the universe is in tune with you. Therefore, your contribution brings this new energy that everybody else can feed off of it.
Just a quick question for you guys, what you think about humor, especially given that what you were saying, everything about artists recently. There's, just in general, there seems to be a lack of humor just worldwide.
All right, so our final question for today, before we all take our well-deserved break.
Hostility and humor don't get along with each other. So, and we now know from a health perspective that hostility is the #1 risk factor for premature death from cardiovascular disease. More than smoking, more than hypertension, more than diabetes. And the best cure for hostility is good humor.
Yeah. Humor comes in many different ways. Sometimes we use humor as a way of not dealing with things. That when someone brings something serious, somebody puts humor out there to diffuse it, and then everybody laughs and nobody takes it seriously. Now, that is the downside of humor. Now, being that I am a lover of humor myself, in order for us to begin to access our humor is going to require that we also deal with our pain and the hostilities that Deepak was talking about earlier. Unless we are able to release what aches us, we cannot genuinely feel happy. We cannot really say, wow, that was good. However, in my tradition, you know, we have what we call the joking relationship, which is about humor. That when a crisis gets to a point that you cannot bring anything to help it, you bring humor to tone it down so you can deal with it. So humor is important, and it benefits the self when we are able to deal with our aching self. And at the same time, we can use it as a way of bringing things together. And so, yes, I'm all for humor, but it has to come in the right way and not be beating up someone or ignoring an important issue.
I think we're gonna wrap now. Anybody else?
I think if we're going to heal the world, we'll all need a lot of humor.
Amen. Okay, thanks. Deepak Chopra, Sorbonne Fusome, Michelle Nun, I'm Ellen Kushner, and thank you all of you for being here.
What's my one wish for people who saw this film? I guess I'd hope that when they finished it, seeing it, they'd stand up, they'd walk out in the lobby, they'd look around them at the other people who'd seen the film, they'd pick out the person who was most unlike them, who seemed most different to them. They'd walk up to that person, they'd put out their hand and they'd say, "Hi, my name's Bob. What did you think of this film?"